Now I'm calmed out for a little bit.
And how many times have you volunteered? Do you know the ratio?
12, I think.
I've sort of been on non-com 5 times, but one was as a chair and one was as a previous chair. So I've been selected 3 times. I think I've volunteered every year I could, which means a lot.
It's still being, it's a lot of elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I don't know when I started volunteering for NomCom. I volunteered for a while every time I could, every year, but I think this is I think I've been coming to IETF since 1998.
I volunteer
That's mine.
for the NomCom, and then if I'm not selected as one of the voting members, I figure out what position I should nominate for. And it's usually, it's a big pain filling out the questionnaire, but I have my previous questionnaire, so. And then I enjoy the interviews a lot, and then I never get selected, so. Whatever. I guess we should start.
It is 3:51.
Yeah. Okay.
The charger does work better when it's plugged in.
Hi, everybody. This is the Babel Working Group.
Just to let you know, Julius, since you're not here, that the entire room is packed full. There's not an empty seat. There are people standing.
Well, maybe.
Let the minutes show.
That was Russ White of LinkedIn. All right, Juniper. I haven't edited this slide. I've edited it elsewhere, but I'll edit it before later. My co-chair, I'm Donald Eastlake from FutureWay. So OT, how do we get this thing in the full page?
So that's above the plus, yeah.
Oh,
Above.
So you wanna first press the full screen button
the full screen.
here, and then you wanna press this one,
Okay.
and then it's left and right to go forward and back.
Okay.
So,
Pretty good. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks. After 2 or 3 more IETFs, I'm sure I'll get it straight.
Then they'll change the system.
Okay. We have the note 12. People should read that. We're subject to the IETF IPR policies. And actually, it's because it's an IETF meeting. We're actually subject to them whether or not this notice is shown. And this is really just the summary. Yeah, so this doesn't,
No,
it's not really synced to the page very well.
Now, press that full screen button, not the one on the keyboard, the one on the screen.
Okay, press the button on the screen.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, excellent. Yeah, and this is just the summary, and it points to the other documents that are the actual full policy. I shouldn't do that, should I? No. Okay, that's what I should do. Okay, so people should review documents. It's a good thing to do, and helps the quality of the documents and the working groups. You can post them to the working group mailing list or whatever. And that way you get your own documents reviewed more likely. This is the current agenda. We're going over the agenda right now to see about passing it. We have Jabber and Minutes Scribe volunteers, Dave and Barbara, so good shape. Well, there's some slides here to go over the status and milestones and stuff. Then the idea would have Barbara present on the status of the Babel information model draft, and Mahesh on the Yang model, and Baptiste remotely on the delay-based measurement metric extension for the Babel protocol. Is there any agenda bashing people would like to add or delete or reorder or anything like that? I guess not. So I guess I will proceed with status. Documents. We have this great set of 4 documents. Applicability, RFC 6126 BIS, and through security, DTLS and HMAC, that are all through IETF last call. And I don't believe there were any notable comments or complaints about them during IETF last call. So they're scheduled for the IESG to formally consider on August 8th. And that's a good package of the basic documents with the protocol and security and the applicability. Applicability is informational. The other 3 are standards track. In the working group, we have documents which I guess all but these source specific are going to be presented.
Really, the source specific you already sent to me.
That's true, now that I think about it. If I should edit. So I can't really edit things on here. Sorry, this is slightly out of date. Mostly up to date, but the source specific we have approved and the publication is requested. However, it still needs AD review and IETF last call and so forth. So it's no longer, however, it is incorrect to say it's in working group last call. It is out of that state. The HomeNet Babel profile draft is, I believe, waiting on RFC 6126 BIS. So it's in the RFC's editor's queue, but waiting on our work. That's in the HomeNet working group. Julia's sent information on implementation to me. I don't know if he wishes to speak, but you can see here it is information on the status of Babel D, Bird, FRR, and S-Babel D, where that their level of compliance is currently. And there have been updates to Wireshark and TCP dump. Actually, like TCP dump, they've been submitted, not merged, but Wireshark can parse the latest RFC 6126 BIS protocol messages. Looking at the milestones, we have milestones. The last 3 are ones which we know what the status is. We're making progress on them, but we're about a year after the, at least first 2, about 9 months maybe after the original projected date for these milestones. But source specific is publication requested. The information model and the management draft, which we consider the Yang draft to be the management draft, are making good progress with his presentations on this. So that's the status. So going back to the agenda, if somebody has questions on any of that, the next thing is the Babel information model. Let's see. So I guess that doesn't escape. What I want to do is go back to the like that. Okay. So then I can do that. And I can do that. Like that. Looks good. Barbara's going to need this here physically closer to her. Unless you
have to stand in the paint spot. When you get over here, I'll hang you.
Under the anvil. Whatever.
Under the anvil or the bucket of water or whatever.
Yeah, just the light. It's okay. So let's see. Oh, I think it's working. Let's see. Not that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we did do sort of a working group last call, and I did some updates. Some of these updates are going to be made irrelevant. The one that I did want to call out, just to make sure that we still have the agreement that I thought we had and that I recorded in the minutes last time, which was the third from the end, the one where we have the router ID value must not consist of all zeros or all ones. And if anybody has issues with that, you can come to the microphone and say so.
They were complaining on J-Rev that we couldn't see you.
They want to see me and not the chairs? Oh. Okay. But that's the only one I wanted to highlight. Then my list of issues is really short now. This is where I finally, parsed Julius's emails, I think, correctly, and we understood one another. And this is what I think we agreed on, which is we're going to completely delete IANA considerations section. Yay! We have no IANA considerations anymore, which makes me happy. I love the IANA people, but I hate having to be considerate. Okay, so then we also will delete those parameters, the link properties, everywhere. And we'll have, let's see, make the Babel interface metric algorithm read write, and then add a Boolean, because I think a Boolean is the appropriate thing for something that is either used or not used, which would be the split horizon parameter. And I'm not adding RTT at this time because I just don't know how far RTT is going and I don't want to build a dependency on it. And so I recommend that in the RTT draft that they can have a little section that says, and this adds the following parameters to the data model kind of thing. This one we also discussed on the list, and that is replace the K out of J enumeration with a 2 out of 3. And then this one we discussed on the list, and this was one of the suggestions which I really liked the best, and that is that we simply allow for it to be the received and calculated metrics to be expressed as a signed integer if needed by the data model. Since it's just something that's reported and never gets, sent back, it should be just fine. And that concludes all my issues. And all my issues have proposed resolutions directly attached to them. So if everybody's fine with all of those, I suggest that I put them in, do an 08 real quickly. We can maybe have another WGLC and then move on. What do you want, David?
Oh, I don't want anything. Julius, however.
Julius, yeah.
From the Jabber. This looks to me like a hack. Shouldn't it be encoded more intuitively?
Which? What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I was talking back to Julius.
Let's see what he's using negative numbers as null.
Oh, it is what it is. It's the way TR 181 does it. You want to call it a hack, that's fine. But it's the way it's expressed. And so as long as I'm allowed to do it, take it from the information model and do it that way, then everybody's happy and everything's fine.
Julius is asking if there's precedent.
Yes. It's been defined for about 15 years now that way. I think that's precedent.
Speaking personally, if there's precedent, I'm fine with it. And he says he'll shut up and retain the right to grumble. His words.
Okay, so that's what I'd like to do. One more quick WGLC, and if nobody speaks up and says anything. Martin?
Yes, so Martin speaking. As part of the review of Babel, the BIS draft, a comment was made that it's not the router ID should be all binary, must not be all binary zeros or all binary ones. And I'm reading in your, so the modification that was made in the Babel BIS draft as part of that review since you have some text in your information model that says the same, you should apply the same modification. Add the notion that it's zeros and ones as binary.
So I'm trying to,
You're trying to follow what I'm saying.
yeah,
You're saying the router ID value must not consist of all zeros or all ones.
yes.
We had that same sentence in the RFC 6126 bis.
Okay.
This sentence has changed in that document to say binary zeros and binary ones.
Oh, now I hear what you're saying. Oh, that's super easy. Okay.
To clarify, as like I made that change, it's just a phrasing to be more clear. So instead of saying all zeros and all one, we says 0x 00000, just to be, or 0x FFFFFF, to be
Right.
just very clear what we meant.
Of course, here in the information model, it's a binary data type. And so, but that's fine. So basically you're just saying stick the word binary in front of zeros and ones.
Look at what's in 6126 bis.
Okay.
I'm now channeling Toke, Holden Jorgensen.
Did you record this in the minutes for me, Russ? Because I know I didn't.
I don't know why not.
Toke's, so back on the topic of -1 for null, he's asking if the information model should just have a way of specifying null and then leave negative numbers to implementation-specific encodings.
So the different data models have different properties. And I was just trying to leave flexibility for the data models to model themselves within their realms. Mahesh?
Mahesh Shefanandani. I would be looking for a suggestion on how do we encode this to indicate null when 0 is a valid value. I would be looking for, tell me how to.
So you want the data model to be a little more explicit than this?
Meaning, if people are objecting and they don't like the idea of negative values signifying unspecified, then maybe they should tell us how they want us to represent unspecified state. Maybe, do we need another flag in the information model that says that this value has not been set? No, I don't.
Well, does Yang have anything similar, any similar issue to this? I don't know.
No,
Oh.
I think I have the same issue. That's why I'm asking this question.
Oh, you do? Okay.
That,
Okay.
If they don't like the way we are trying to represent it in either TR 181 or Yang, how would they like us to represent it?
Well, and I mean, in 181, I provided kind of the text that 181 has on data modeling, where it specifically says that null values are modeled as -1 using a signed integer. And TR 181 specifically has this in its rule set of this is how you model something where you need to represent null for an integer. For an unsigned integer, you make it a signed integer and you use a -1, and that's our rules.
So Toke again. I misread. TR 181 already has a representation for null, but it's a bad one. Gotcha. I can live with negative numbers.
And so you're okay with this too? Okay. That was Mahesh I was asking, for those of you who couldn't see Mahesh nodding. Anyway, so I think we're good. Cool. Good?
Yeah, unless there's further comments or questions, which I don't see any of. So,
Thanks.
okay. Let's see here. Okay.
All right, my presentation hopefully will be even shorter than Barbara's because I track her information model. So the changes to the latest version, which I didn't get to, of course, before the cutoff, but I did submit on Monday, and I'm sure all of you have read it, is tracking 07. And I guess if she goes 08, then I will make another rev to catch up with the last set of changes. And then we'll talk about last call. Anyway, so I do have 3 issues that I wanted to kind of talk about. In management systems, it's generally considered a good idea to suggest what I think as default values, simply because operators sometimes don't know what to set. So if some guidance is given, they appreciate it. So I kind of listed some default values that I thought made sense, but I'll let the work group tell me now that don't do this. So if I'm going to pause and let you kind of scan through and tell me that some of these values don't really make sense. And I can even explain, I think Barbara had some question about why, but
There's a remote speaker here, Julius.
I'm going to push the eject button.
Go ahead.
We ejected you, Julius.
No, there you go. Okay.
We can't hear you.
This time?
Yes.
Good. Can you also understand me?
Now we can hear you, but you're a bit distorted.
Okay, I'm doing my best.
Okay?
Okay. Quick, so expected multicast hello and expected unicast hello are undefined before you've received. So first of all, one of them is not per interface, it's per neighbor. The expected unicast hello secno is per neighbor, not per interface. And second point, the expected multicast hello secno is undefined before you've received the first secno.
Okay.
The first hello, sorry.
all right, sure. So I can remove that.
Now, the other thing, Mahesh, that you and I had been discussing was that we were expecting, well, the interface table object is not writable. That is, from a management's perspective, you can't create new interfaces. And so defaults would really only apply from the perspective of the implementation itself creating the instances.
Okay, so yes and no. The existence of the interface, of course, is system driven. So system creates the interface. But for example, enabling it, you can either come up enable default true, or you can come up enable default false, which means either the interface comes up and is enabled by default, or it is disabled by default.
And I guess my question, and this goes to the people listening like Julius, is do we need to specify a default? Do we need to know that it comes up true or comes up false? And what does it mean in the context? Because this is in the Yang model, because I've resisted putting this in the information model, so this is not something that would apply to other instantiations of the information model using different data models, and it would only apply to Yang. And I'm trying to understand, do we need really to know whether it comes up enabled or disabled?
Okay, so just like a quick response, it's a Boolean, so it's either going to come up true or it's going to come up false. We can leave it undetermined, or we can say, well, the default is a certain known value, and what would we like it to be?
We have Julius remotely.
So I haven't thought about it seriously, but does that mean that the Yang models is telling us how implementations should behave? So for example, in the Babel implementation, the metric algorithm is going to be set automatically depending on whether the interface is detected as wired or wireless. Here I
No.
have the impression that the Yang model is dictating to the implementation how it should behave by default.
No, this is not a Yang model telling implementation how to behave. What it is doing is when the first set of configs come down to the router, it's saying this is what the set of default values it might come with, unless of course you override them. And taking the enable example is that when you see that first set of config, it'll tell the router enable the interface. Does that
And
make
no, I don't understand here. Where are those values used? From an implementation point of view, at which point do I need to take these values into account?
From an implementation perspective, no. It's the management system telling you that since this instance is created, I'm giving you a set of config values, and one of them is the set of defaults in it. And by default, you should now, if there's an interface state, which is, sorry, admin state, set it to enable.
So these values will be explicitly in the configuration block, or will they be inferred automatically if they're absent from the configuration block?
They will be explicitly specified for for you to set in the code, or sorry, in the state of the system. I don't know if I'm making that clear.
Yes, but what I don't understand is that if they are explicitly specified, then what makes them default?
Okay, good question. So they are default from the client, the management client perspective. So it's the management client when it's trying to configure Babel. It says there are all these parameters that I may or may not have to specify. And in there are some defaults that it can set and send it down to the router to say, this is how I want the initial configuration to look like.
Okay, I don't feel very comfortable with that. So for example, the metric algorithm or the split horizon values are going to depend on whether an interface is wired or wireless.
Okay.
So those values would be fine, except for the hello secnos. These values would be fine if we assume that all links are wired.
I see. So
On a wireless link, they're simply incorrect. They will break your network if you use them on a wired link.
So I have a proposal, David Skenazy. How about we define, so for some of these, it's pretty straightforward. Say the port, the default is 6696, and
Yeah.
that's an easy one. I don't think there is any argument there. But for some things like, say, the metric algorithm, we could define an algorithm which is just default. And all that says, and that's what we would put in the default field here, and all that says is, hey, implementation, be smart. Would that solve everyone's concerns?
I think that's what happens if you don't send the value at all.
Oh, actually, so Mahesh, what happens if we don't have a default value?
So, okay, first of all, yes, I should clarify that. Default values, if you don't specify and they're not mandatory, it's up to the implementation what it does with that particular attribute. If it's a mandatory attribute, then usually the expectation is that the management system will provide a default value because it's mandatory, so it has to have a value. It's better to specify something that is reasonable than something that doesn't make any sense. So I don't remember if any of these are mandatory.
So just for those of us who don't speak Yang and what mandatory means in the context of Yang, I think what we discussed mandatory meant was if you are saying, if the management system is providing, saying, I want you to provide, write a value or to metric algorithm, it has to provide a value. It cannot provide an empty string.
A little more than that. It's saying that, or the implementation is saying that I need you to tell me that what this value should be, because without it, I don't know what to do.
Right. It
So,
has
for
to-
example, metric algorithm, if you don't tell me, then what am I supposed to
But
choose?
it will already have a value. I mean, the implementation is the one that created this interface.
Okay. So then my question is, why can't that be the default value?
Well, because it has its own logic that it goes through in assigning a value.
Oh.
It looks at the link that came up and it said, oh, this link is attached to my, radio. And so I'm going to decide to assign it.
Okay, good point. Then in that case, in Yang terms, this is not a mandatory field because you're deriving that value based on certain other parameters. So there, yes.
Right. So I really think, we've got the port number in the multicast group, and we've even got those defaults defined in the information model. And I think probably you want to let the implementation have logic on whether it comes up enabled or not, rather
Okay.
than try and suggest that the Yang model knows better. And so I'm really thinking just the first two, and we already have defaults for those.
Okay, I think, yes, we pretty much so ruled out. So I don't remember what we said about TX cost. Did we-
0 is fine. 0 is fine in most circumstances.
Okay.
But for it's Kanazi. For all the other ones, I agree with Barbara. Just saying these are like non-mandatory and no default values seems easier.
Fair enough.
Martin Vigo, I'm not a Yang expert, but could it be that some of these are in fact state rather than config?
If they are state, then absolutely there's no point, or you can't even specify a default value.
Yes. That's
Then, yeah. I know that we can went back and forth whether it is state or config, and maybe I might not have completely tracked the latest changes. And I know like link properties completely changed on me while I was writing this up. So maybe, yes, it's not even,
yeah.
okay. Okay,
Okay,
Julius
Julius
is-
come back, I guess.
They,
Import buttons.
they are most definitely config. They're input to the algorithm, except that in existing implementations, in at least some of the existing implementations, they are computed automatically at startup.
Okay.
Is that clear? The default values, if not configured otherwise, are determined automatically using a somewhat complex algorithm.
Fair enough. Okay, so then I'm left with 3, port number, multicast group, and TX cost. Okay.
I would also say to also remove TX cost because I think it, like Julius was saying, it would work, but I'm not sure there's a lot of value in specifying a default here. Similar to the other ones, the implementation will come up with a sensible default on its own. So I don't think it should be a mandatory or with a default as well. Whereas port number and multicast group, the router can't even get started without those. I think those are the only two that are like crucial and mandatory because it doesn't work otherwise.
Okay, so then let me ask the inverse question. I am assuming that TX cost is a writable parameter. What happens if the management system puts in 100? Because we have not specified a default.
Well, specifying a default won't prevent the management system from passing in 100, right?
No, it doesn't prevent it. By default, of course, yeah. If you don't set it, it'll set it to 0.
Well, if we don't set a default, it just don't send anything to the implementation, let it do the right thing.
Okay. Again, I don't remember whether this is mandatory or not, but Okay. I took an action item in the last meeting to say, let me see if I can come up with an example. And I do want to thank Julius for sending me an output of what his router looked like. What I could glean through was unfortunately not too much information as far as config was concerned. It was a lot of state information, but not enough of config. So I have a very, very simple example. I would really like to expand on this. And what I'm referring to, if I can get the pointer. So in this example, all I'm doing is I'm enabling Babel and I'm enabling statistics gathering. As I said, very simple. Ideally, I'd like to expand this to be a little more comprehensive in terms of config. So please help me for all the parameters. If you can tell me what is some of the values, I would like to expand on this. Okay, this was an open issue in 104. So I started to look at it and I said, well, I don't really know Babel that much, but so I need to understand what aspects of routing policy need to be augmented. And what I have are some examples of what BGP does. So I would like to similarly understand what aspects of the routing policy we want to augment, add for Babel. Again, it's an action item for the working group. And that is pretty much it.
On this slide, Julius is saying he'll send examples to the list.
Okay. And no, so which slide does he mean? For the example or the routing policy?
Julius, which slide?
Anyway, I think I'll ask.
Routing policy examples to the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Let's see here. Okay. So, Baptiste, I guess if you request the microphone, you can speak. I can advance the slides here or.
Hi,
There we go. Okay.
do you hear me?
Yep, we can see you in a little image. That's weird.
Okay.
Hmm?
Maybe.
Okay. Okay, yes, we can see you.
Is it better? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to present the new draft on the delay-based metric that got adopted recently. So this is work I did with Julius some time ago. Now I'm doing a PhD in Grenoble in France. So I will. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I will provide an overview. So Julius already explained about the draft last time, so I will be quick. Then some words about implementation, and then what ideas to update the draft to progress. Next slide, please. Okay, so quickly, the main use case is overlay networks, where basically you have Babel has no information on the underlying topology. So if you just use op count as a metric, you will end up with a very wrong routing choices. For instance, to go from Marseille to Lille, using Tokyo or Paris is the same if you just use op count. So Next slide, please. So the basic idea is to use RTT measurements on each link and derive a metric from that. So it's not as easy to do as just like sending a ping or designing a protocol that works like this, because Babel is asynchronous. So it buffers TLVs, and then sometimes at some point it has some jitter to avoid synchronization and so on. So basically, the solution we found was to use the same algorithm as NTP. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically, peer A sends a message to peer B. We record the timestamp from the sender and timestamp at the receiver. Then some time elapses, and B decides to send a message to A at some point. And we also remember all timestamps. And basically, if you want the RTT, you just have to subtract the part on the right between T'1 and T'2, and you get the RTT. The nice thing is that it works even if the clocks are not synchronized. It just need to have the same rate, which is reasonable if you wait a few seconds. Yeah, that's it. Next slide, please. So yeah, basically we send these timestamps that we need for RTT measurements in hello messages. So that's the one on top. And for the return message, so we also send the timestamp in the hello message, but we also copy timestamp from the previous message in IETF messages, so that A at the end can use all these timestamps to compute the RTT. And yeah, this timestamp use sub-TLVs to encode the data in the messages. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the format for hello and hi you. Okay, next slide. I'm going a bit fast, but so this is the next picture that Julius used the last time, which I find quite interesting. Because with this algorithm, you obtain samples, but then you can have noise and so on. So we have a smoothing algorithm to get nicer RTT values. Then we use a function to obtain a metric. Potentially, we have a link cost that is configurable. Then you get a metric, and then there's another layer of stabilization, let's say, to decide which route you want to select. I won't talk a lot about smoothing, but next slide, please. Yeah, so that's the way so that's an example of a way to compute the metric from the RTT. In the draft, we really say it's up to the implementation, but in the reference implementation, we use this one, and it works fine, so probably a good idea. So if the RTT is smaller than a value, we just use a fixed cost. If it's higher than a given value, it probably means that there is a saturation somewhere. So we have a maximum metric value, maximum cost, and in between just a linear map. So the part on the right is really designed to avoid oscillations, because if you have basically if your network is completely saturated, the cost will be maximum for all links, and it would prevent or at least limit oscillations that you could get otherwise. Okay, next slide, please. And yeah, if you want more details, Jules' presentation is available, and we wrote a paper also that is freely available. Next slide. Okay, implementation. So during my internship, I implemented this extension in the reference implementation, Babel. Yeah, it was 5 years ago. So Talker expressed some interest to implement this extension in Bird, which is nice. So we'll see if it interoperates. And for the other implementations, I have no idea if there is interest or not. And so it's still a draft, but it's already used in production. So a French company is using that for an overlay network in production. There's also another company, I guess, Althea, that is using this extension in a mesh network where they have both wireless links, fiber links, potentially tunnels, internet links, and they don't want to have to configure the metric on each link based on whether it's a local link, a long distance link. So they just use this RTT extension and it gives the right metric automatically. And also there's a project called LibreMesh, which for now I think is using OLSR or BMX. No, I think it's BMX. And they are looking at switching to Babel, and they would use this extension also. So it would potentially be used in several community networks. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are just like small updates on the draft. So I got some questions about unicast hello and how timestamp work in this case. So it's not that different, but it could be clarified. There's a typo. The third point is just that the way the packet format is declared in the draft. You can understand that values are 16 bits, and then there is a gap with no information in the field, where it's actually 30 bits, but it's unaligned. So I got bitten by this today again, so it needs to be clarified. And of course, we have to wait until the new Babel RFC comes out so that you can update the references. So next slide is the most, so this needs some discussion. So basically, as you've seen, we need to have in the same Babel packet both a hello and an IHU, because we need the 3 timestamps from these 2 messages to compute a RTT. The problem is that there is no requirement that you get these 2 types of messages in the same packet. An implementation could just send 2 different packets, one with a hello and another one with IHU. And in that case, we cannot measure any RTT. So the reference implementation, and I think Bird also does the right thing, but nothing prevents an implementation to do it differently. So there are several possible solutions for this. So basically, we could put all timestamps in the IHU messages, so that it's self-sufficient. The main problem if we do that is that we would copy a timestamp several times in different IHU messages. So it's a lot of per packet overhead. So there are 2 ways to do that. Julius provided another solution, which will be to send timestamp in a separate TLV that does not depend on hello. So we could require that if you send an IHU with a timestamp, you also send this new TLV. And then there's just another solution, which is to say that if you implement this extension, you just have to send a hello with each IHU, so that we don't have this problem. So I don't know if it's very clear. Do you have any input, comments?
David Skenazy. I like the alternative solution. That way we don't have to break compatibility because this is deployed in production. And now that we have unicast hellos, I think that's also like pretty easy in case that you're running over unicast. So that's what I would personally recommend.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Right. So I didn't actually catch what it was that David was recommending.
The alternative solution, which at the bottom of the slide, which is anytime you send, and I heard you and you're using this extension, also send a hello.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to suggest another breaking change, which is nanosecond resolution timestamps. So while we're breaking things, however, more seriously, it doesn't have to be breaking because we could define both, and then it can be an additional one, but that makes the overhead even bigger.
Okay.
Yes. So it's did you talk to Dave to get this idea? Yeah, but
Are you referring to Dave Tat, by the way, just to clarify?
yeah, Dave Tat, yeah, sorry. So nanosecond resolution is nice, but is there a use case for it? It looks difficult to measure actually timestamp with a good enough resolution that it would be useful. Like if you do the timestamping is in user space, you won't get a nanosecond resolution, I guess.
No, but you can get better than microsecond resolution. So this is sort of like the use case is you can have the protocol show you the fastest way through your data center by RTT. So it's sort of a different use case. And I'm not sure, like I don't have a deployed use case for it right now. But like there's some interesting things happening with paste networking, and you can sort of put timestamps into the hardware and have the Ethernet device paste them out. So I think it might be feasible to actually need the lower granularity at some point. And it would be a shame if we define this as a standard and we cannot do this. So it's more sort of from that perspective.
There's another issue because the timestamp currently is using 32 bits.
Yes, it would have to be.
So if you use a nanosecond resolution, yeah, you would have 4 seconds to reply to a message. So probably something in between nanosecond and microsecond would be nice.
Yeah,
would be feasible.
Or just a bigger field.
Sorry?
Just add another byte.
Oh, yeah, a bigger field. Yeah.
Maybe we should let Julius in here, says he his comments.
So the issue that Baptiste has been speaking of is that if you want to be able to interpret an IHU timestamp, you need to have a hello in the same packet. So it's not quite correct that the Babel D implementation does the right thing. If you set it to unicast mode, then you are going to have packets with no hellos, and you need to use unicast hellos for that. However, in 6126 bis, we have two new features, which are unicast hellos and unscheduled hellos, which I think pretty much solve the problem. If people think they don't solve the problem, then we can define a new TLV that you can send at any time that allows you to send a timestamp without attaching it to a hello. And there was a second point. We don't currently have any use cases, any deployed use cases for microsecond resolution. The initial version of the extension, a long time ago, actually used centiseconds, hundreds of a second. They've put some pressure on us to switch to microseconds. We have. I would really like to see a convincing use case before we switch to nanoseconds. And if we switch to nanoseconds, then we need to have 48-bit timestamps, as Baptiste pointed out. And then we need to do 48-bit arithmetics, and that complicates the implementation. So it's not a big deal, but I think we should have a convincing use case before we do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think it would also be possible to add it in later. Like if we define the base, extension, we can always add another field for higher resolution. Either just like add some more bits that is the fractional microseconds in a separate TLV, or define an alternative one that does the same thing but with a different resolution. So it's not sort of a big deal, and I kind of agree that it's probably a good idea to not break the deployed base. So we already have one flag day for source specific on Babel D, right? So if we were going to make a flag day for this, it would not be able to make it into the same release, or so it would be a separate flag day, which I think we should avoid, unless I'm missing something.
I don't think we'd need a flag day. What we can simply do is define a new sub-TLV with higher granularity timestamps, send both for a year or so, and then deprecate the old one.
Yeah, so for me, basically, if we break compatibility because of what's written on this slide so solution 1 or solution 2, then we can also break it to change the resolution. But if we go with the alternative solution to just require that you should send a hello with an I hear you, then let's not break it just for the resolution.
Yeah, I'm just nodding. So I agree. Let's try to solve this without breaking anything, and then add more resolution to the timestamps afterwards when we have a use case. That's fine.
Cool.
Davis Kanazi, just a question for Baptiste. Since you propose the 3 solutions and you're the author, what's your personal preference?
The alternative solution. Because
Sorry,
yeah, the last one, the alternative solution. Because it requires no change to the implementation. And it's just simpler. So yeah, the last one.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of us are in agreement.
Okay.
Okay. I guess we could take the, does it appear that there's enough people in favor of that that we should just sort of confirm it on the list? I see some thumbs
Okay.
up here, so people who don't like that should complain, and I'll post a message or asking about it.
Okay, I send an email then. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Barbara, want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, when we had that info model, we mentioned that the RTT draft needed to identify any parameters that it would need. For example, I think we've already sort of discussed that it would probably add would it be an RTT Boolean in the interface object? And I guess I can
Sounds
propose
reasonable.
that on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
basically, in the reference implementation, we have several parameters. So the first one is, do we want to send timestamps on this interface? Because it consumes some amount of packet space, so you may want to disable it. Then there are some parameters. So maybe you can go to slide 8 or 9, something. So yes, this one. No, next one. Yes, this one. So basically, you can configure the min RTT, max RTT, min cost, which is actually the average cost, TX cost. It's already there in Babel, and max cost, which is a new one. So with this metric, there's a set of new parameters to add to the model.
Okay, that's good. I think we should have a section in the document that kind of specifically talks about information model needed.
Okay. I'm not
Okay.
really up to date on this, but I can read.
Okay. Are there any further comments? Here. Let's make a note here. Okay. So. See, I wanted to go. Oops. So that's the end of the regular agenda. We have 10 minutes left in theory.
According to the
no,
agenda,
sorry. Yeah,
we have -2 minutes
We
left.
have -2 minutes. Well, okay, -1 minute according to my watch. I'm sorry, I was confused for a second. Anyway, okay, then I guess it worked out just right in time. Unless somebody has something really urgent to bring up, concludes the Babel meeting. If you did not sign the blue sheets, there should be 2 lists. There's one up on the chair here, and there's another one, I think, over on this side. And we'll see you on the list. Yeah.
Token and Baptiste are saying thanks, and great. Everyone on Jabber is thanking the chairs.
Okay, thank you. Status, which, yes, this one is slightly out of date and the source specific is not in working group last call. Okay.
There we go.
Oh, sorry. There you go. You're welcome. These slides are all online, of course, so you can get them. I'll just leave that up for a bit, and let's say we are